A few weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., covering the White House as President Trump detailed the rescue of a downed American airman in Iran. Later that evening, I attended the launch of Jan Jekielek's book, Kill to Order, focused on one of the darkest human rights issues in the world, China's organ harvesting industry. Now, there were some remarkable people in that room. I had the opportunity to meet actor Rob Schneider and speak with others who have spent years exposing human rights abuses around the world. But there was one person who left the biggest impression on me that night. It wasn't a celebrity, it was Jason Jones. Now, most people know Jason as a filmmaker, human rights activist, and founder of the Vulnerable People Project. But as we sat and talked, he began sharing story after story of helping vulnerable people escape some of the most dangerous places on earth. War zones, conflict regions, persecuted religious communities, the kinds of places most journalists never even go, and the kinds of stories most media will never tell. We're going to begin with a breaking story that just hit the news wires involving a Catholic Marian festival. It happened in the West Bank that Jason's organization was documenting when tensions suddenly exploded. And then we're going to go much deeper, because some of the stories that Jason shared with me are almost impossible to believe, and I want you to hear every one of them. Jason, welcome to the Next News Network.
It's a privilege to be on your show, and it was great meeting you as well. You left quite an impression, so it's great to see you.
Well, we were just talking, and you had mentioned that you were going to be in town, and then you dropped this bomb on me. And this is something that really just blew my mind. This is the breaking story. Your organization, this is from the Daily Caller, was on the ground documenting a Catholic Marian festival in Teba when reports emerged that Israeli military personnel attempted to halt the event before church authorities even intervened. What exactly happened there?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and I'm grateful that it happened while our cameras were there, because this is not unusual. This is something that happens every day. It's been happening every day to Christians in the West Bank, in Palestine, since 1948. And this is really minor compared to so many things that have happened. A couple of weeks ago, I got the idea. We have our director of Middle East projects works out of Amman, Jordan. And I said, I'd like to throw a festival. The Christians in Taiba have been under almost daily relentless attack from radical Zionist terrorist organizations, youth organizations. I said, they've suffered so much. Let's underwrite a festival. We'll pay for the food, the music, the stage, the lights. Let's just give them a beautiful day. We reached out to the parish, and the parish priest said, we're already going. We have an annual festival on May 29th. Would you like to support us for that festival? I said, we would. So we hired a Palestinian film crew, and then we sent an American crew over as well. And we just wanted to document the festival. The day before the festival, my prayer was, look, we want to run influence campaigns. We want to educate people on the truth of what's happening. And so I had the angel on this shoulder and the devil on this shoulder. And the angel was telling me, pray that they have a beautiful, peaceful day. Pray that the settlers know that our cameras are there and they leave them alone. And then this guy was like, no, let's pray that they get attacked. And it was quite sorrowful that it was worse than we actually could have imagined.
Really?
The attack didn't come from the settlers. It came from the IDF. The IDF came in with helicopters, drones, armored vehicles. They threw stun grenades. It really startled the young Christian woman, an American woman that works for me in Jordan. She was there to hear the grenade going off. A grenade went off very close to her, a stun grenade, not a shrapnel grenade, but a stun grenade. And it was quite sorrowful. But because I anticipated this could happen, I was up through the night, and I had already written multiple press releases for multiple things that could happen. And but we didn't have a press release written for if the IDF attacked. This seemed something unimaginable. So I scrambled, and before the sun rose on Washington, D.C. and New York City, we had press releases in the boxes of news agencies across the world, alerting the world to what had happened. And I'm really grateful, because what ended up happening is that Cardinal Pete Zabala reached out to Israel. Pressure, the military forces were pulled back. And at the end of the day, the beautiful ancient Christian community that goes back to the time Jesus Christ walked there. Literally, Jesus Christ walked through the town we now know today as Taiba. There's an unbroken Christian heritage of the same families that have lived there from the time of Jesus Christ. In fact,
Wow.
when you read about in the book of Acts, the languages and ethnicities and cultures that made up Palestine at the time of the incarnation, at the time of the crucifixion and the resurrection, and then at Pentecost, those descendants make up the community we now know as the Palestinian Christians, and actually broader the Palestinians, because during the Muslim invasions, a large percentage of the Palestinian community eventually converted to Islam. But they really descend from those very first Jewish converts, those very first Jewish followers of Jesus Christ.
Jason, I need to ask you, because when you told me this, you hear about the persecution of different minority groups in the Middle East, but when it comes to the topic of, we're talking about the IDF. Why is the I mean, I couldn't quite comprehend why the IDF is going after a Catholic group. Like, we have all these Christian organizations in the United States, and they're constantly supporting Israel. They're sending money there. They're sending support. You see the commercials on late night on Fox. And it's about the repatriation of the Israeli people back to Israel. But why would the IDF go after a Catholic group? Like, what's the reason? It just blows my mind. I never considered this.
Well, the radical Zionists that are represented by people like Randy Fine and Ben Gvir want to completely cleanse Christians from the land. In fact, as the Christians of the Holy Land will tell you, the Zionists hate us more than the Muslims, which is true. In fact, just today, I was doing a call on a documentary with Palestinian Christian leaders that are scattered across the Holy Land. And that's one thing they kept saying over and over and over again. We know it is so hard for you to understand because we have been propagandized. Myself, I wrote an article at the early days of the war when we were evacuating wounded Christian women, pregnant women and children to Egypt through Rafah Gate. And as I was interviewing these Palestinians, I realized that when I was listening to the Palestinians that I was interviewing clandestinely in Cairo, we had a safe house in Cairo where we set up a recording studio. And look, I wanted to evacuate these wounded Christian women and children. I wanted to evacuate Palestinian civilians that needed immediate medical attention. But at the same time, I still kind of didn't really understand how deep were the prejudices that I held onto until as I was interviewing them, I thought, well, I can't believe all these women have PhDs. And, and all these, my internal dialogue, I kind of felt like I was Joe Biden talking about Barack Obama. And I went back to my hotel in Cairo and I wrote an article called "Help, I'm an Anti-Palestinian Bigot." So I'm not pointing fingers here. We've all really been indoctrinated. The Palestinians are the most calumniated people on earth. And so we think it's the Muslims that are cleansing the Christians from the West Bank and from Gaza. And in Gaza, it is true, every Palestinian Christian that has worked for me has been arrested by both Hamas and by Israel. Wow. They've been in Israeli prisons and they've been in Hamas prisons, every Christian that works for me in Gaza. But of course, in the West Bank, Hamas is not in the West Bank. And so it's hard to understand that the people that the Christians in the United States have loved so much, have fought for and cared for so much, hate them because they see Christianity as quote unquote adultery, blasphemy, that we are pagans, we believe in three gods, where the radical Zionists see that the Muslims are strict monotheists, so they don't defile the land.
Well, because we believe in the Trinity? They think
because
that's three?
Because we believe in the Trinity. Yeah, this is true.
Oh, okay. All right. So they interpret the Trinity as polytheistic.
They do. And so when you see the videos, it's not an exception of priests and nuns being kicked and spit on and beaten, their farms being burned down, their livestock being slaughtered, the Palestinian Christians themselves being beaten and murdered. There hasn't been a violent attack on a Palestinian Christian by a settler prosecuted in 6 years. Not in
Wow.
6 years, not one attack. These attacks happen daily. In fact, Alice Casilla, who's quite well known because of the settlers' relentless violence against her and her family, and she's very strong and stands up to them. Her property again was raided again today. A Christian woman whose family has been there since the time of Christ suffers daily relentless attack from Zionist settlers. And where do these settlers come from? Ukraine, Russia, the United States.
Wow.
It's quite frustrating. And they think that's their land. They think that's their land.
Well,
A
and then
friend of mine,
and then you have the Christian organizations here that are supporting that, so-called repatriation of these people to those lands. So these very same Christian organizations are inadvertently supporting the terrorization of our own Christian communities, our own brothers
yeah.
and sisters.
Well, I'm Catholic. Joel Berry of Babylon Bee said publicly on X that there are no Christians being persecuted in Gaza. There are none. There are no true believers. What he meant by that was Catholics and Orthodox are not Christians.
Oh, really?
Okay, so I think it's startling for a lot of evangelicals and Protestants when they go to Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, the West Bank, that those churches are Orthodox and Catholic. Those communities have been there since the first century. Their liturgies are more or less the same exact rubrics. I've been to churches in Iraq that have been there since the first century, and they pray still and talk. Their language is Aramaic.
Wow.
All the way to India, there are first century Christian communities. And by the way, that St. Thomas founded. And those communities are under relentless attack by Hindu nationalists. So yeah, the poor, the first century Christian communities are being brutalized right now by Islamists, Hindu extremists, Zionist extremists, and Christian Zionists are cheering it on all the way.
Oh my goodness.
And to think that these are the descendants of the very first Christian communities, the very first Christian communities on earth, Christian communities that have been in place for 2,000 years in India, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Bethlehem, in Betzahor, in Taibe, they're fighting for their very existence. And then so many American Christians, our friends, my friends, your friends, my neighbors, your neighbors, I homeschool my kids, families in our homeschool group. They're not silent on the cleansing of Christians from Bethlehem. They're literally cheering it on. They're literally
And
cheering
they
it
don't
on.
even know. They're totally clueless, and that's why when you told me what happened, I was completely blindsided, and I'm glad you brought this to my attention because now I feel like some scales have dropped from my eyes, and I can see clearly what's happening. So, you said you had issued a press release. You had press releases that were sent out across the world. Has the White House responded? Because I know that President Trump just today, he's trying to get this whole Iran situation settled, and he's got the Israeli military. He's got Benjamin Netanyahu, who's he's just going off and like a cowboy in some cases, launching attacks into Iran, and Trump's going, "What the hell are you doing? You're screwing up the game here. You're like you're going to throw this whole thing off." President Trump's trying to get the nuclear dust, as he calls it, extracted. He's trying to open up the Strait of Hormuz so it's an international waterway and not controlled by any one nation. I mean, I think these are noble causes, but when you have Israel that's just running around and doing their own thing, and President Trump has to, I mean, Fox
Flattening
News
Lebanon. They're
that?
flattening Lebanon. The president lost it over Lebanon. What is happening in Lebanon is utterly unbelievable, and I'm so grateful for President Trump for this his leaked statement, which we now know is true. I mean, I have to believe it's true the way people like Mark Levin have responded. It's unbelievable. If Russia did this in Ukraine, and I've been on the front lines in the war in Ukraine, if Russia did this in Ukraine, the world would be horrified. What is happening in Lebanon is absolutely unbelievable. It's unspeakable. What happened in Gaza is unbelievable, unspeakable. And I want to go back to October 7th because I'm not sitting here on a high horse. When I saw the images of October 7th, what went through my own mind, Mr. Humanitarian Human Rights Activist, well, the first words that went through, and I never said it out loud, I got so angry, I said flatten Gaza. That went through my mind. And the first thing I
I
did,
think it went through everybody's minds when we
yeah, it
heard
went through
about
my
it.
mind. What is this? This is barbarism. And then the second thing I did is I called my team in Nigeria, where we provide security for vulnerable Christian communities facing Islamist extremism. And I knew of a vulnerable Jewish community that needed securing, and I just didn't have the funds for it. I just said, do it. I'll find the funds. Secure this Jewish community. And now, to this day, we provide security. We drilled wells so the women don't have to walk for water to keep them safer. We installed cameras. But it was just 2 weeks later, on October 18th, after October 7th, that Israel bombed the oldest continuous use church in the world. And then I had a dilemma. Do I condemn Israel for this? And I said, I know I'm going to get kicked in the face by my allies if I do this. And I said to myself, if I don't do this, I should never open my mouth again. I've condemned the United States. I broke a story in 2012 on Obama's drone war, where I had leaked to me from a government agency the names and ages of every child killed by a U.S. drone strike. I published that article. If I can condemn the United States for targeting civilians, I sure as heck can speak out against the state of Israel when it bombs a church. But immediately I began facing relentless attacks. But it was even for months later. It wasn't until I was in Cairo with the women and children that we evacuated, as I interviewed them, and it's the full indiscriminate, the full extent of the indiscriminate brutality that the Palestinians were suffering. But my eyes began to open, and I think this is happening for everyone, and it may be happening now for President Trump. And as I've now been working in Gaza and the West Bank, since October 18th, I have to say it is, and anyone who goes there comes back and says, like, we're surprised. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing because we're surprised, but it's truly, I've never felt more at home anywhere in the world. It is truly such a beautiful community. First I went to Bethlehem and I said, okay, this is Bethlehem. Of course I feel home here, but Ramallah must be scary. I went to Ramallah and it's just so beautiful and so peaceful and the people are so wonderful. And then I went to Taiba, and then that's a different story altogether.
Well,
It's chilling.
speaking of that city, Taiba, has the White House responded to what happened there?
Not publicly, but I can tell you that I do know for a fact that the White House and the Vatican became almost immediately aware of what happened, and it was shocking. It rocked the White House, and it rocked the Vatican.
Oh, I could only imagine.
And,
And
and,
then,
and what's interesting to me about this is it's like when the Israeli soldier chopped the head off the crucifix.
oh yeah,
And
yeah, I
you
remember
know,
that.
just a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, why does that bother us so much more than the fact that in December 18th, after October 7th, on December 18th or December 16th, an IDF soldier, for no reason at all, shot a mother and her daughter in the church compound as they were leaving mass going to the restroom. And then as men went to give them aid, the IDF opened up fire on those men. And I'm like, why is it that the chopping of a plastic statue of Jesus or the stopping of a Marian festival captures our attention when, the Pope Francis, prior to Pope Leo, personally asked Netanyahu, will you please let the Catholic children with cancer leave Gaza for treatment? And the answer has been no. So to this day, no Christian, nobody can leave Gaza for medical treatment. If you have leukemia, you're going to die there. Sorry, too bad, too sad. That hasn't captured the world's attention. And I've thought a lot, and I don't have the answer for that, other than maybe it's not the attack on the living stones, the living, breathing members of the mystical body of Christ that we believe as Catholics, all baptized believers are, whether they're Catholic or not. If you're baptized, you are a part of the body of Christ. Maybe destroying those living stones doesn't bother us as much as smashing the symbols that look very familiar to the symbols that we have in our house. I don't know what it is, but regardless, I'm glad that people are waking up. And I want to say this just to your
Sure.
audience. My organization we're providing security to Muslim girls' schools in in Afghanistan, Christian communities across the world. We serve the Yazidi, the Muslim Uyghur, the Falun Dafa and Falun Gong. We secure synagogues and churches in Africa. We don't look to see if you're circumcised. We don't ask if you were baptized. Um, I want to live out my vocation as a Christian man by serving the most vulnerable people in the world and hoping that that example points them to God and their vocation to love each other and to love their creator. We don't want to foment Jew hatred or anti-Semitism. And in fact, I think we should remember that the most outspoken and most passionate and consistent critics of this war have been Jewish. In fact, President Herzog just recently came out and powerfully condemned the settler violence. The former head of the CIA, I'm sorry, of Mossad, from 2011 to 2017, just spoke out against the violence, the settler violence in the West Bank. So it's not. We see radical ideologies. I say this: there are Mark Levins, Randy Fines, and Lindsey Graham's in every religion and in every culture. And there are brave and humane and kind souls in every religion and every culture. I'm a Christian, and I want to live out the tenets of my faith. And our faith seems the one faith that should make it impossible to other. It seems to be the fundamental message of Christianity. We're to even love our enemies. We're to pray for those who persecute us. We're supposed to leave the flock to find the one lost sheep. But yet, even in our faith, you can find pastors like John Hagee or demagogues like Lindsey Graham, and they will harness our faith to other, calling Palestinians Amalek and saying they need to be exterminated. So we shouldn't be shocked to find out that they're extremists, that are Hindu, that they're extremists, that are Muslim. Of course.
Jason, I was talking with my son before we did this interview. I went for a walk in the park with him, and I was telling him about you. I said, I have a really important interview that's coming up, and I want you to learn about this. And so I let him read, the introduction that I read at the beginning of this interview. And he was just really taken by the whole thing. He's like, wow, this is really amazing, Dad. And, he's going into 6th grade. It's the summer. And I explained to him, I said, what Jason does is he executes what Christ instructed us. He helps everybody. And Christ told us, love thy neighbor. Very simple. Love thy neighbor. He didn't say, love only Christians. He didn't say love only, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't isolated. He said neighbor. And that's every one of us. And I explained that to him, and it was very sort of a simplified way of explaining what you do. And I want to talk more about some of the amazing work that you've done, because most people have no idea what it actually involves. I mean, you have filmmaking, activism, physically helping vulnerable people, some of the most dangerous places in the world. Okay, you've worked in places like Afghanistan, Sudan, Ukraine, the Middle East, conflict zones. What was the first mission that made you realize that this would become your life's work? I mean, when we spoke after that event with the book, some of the stories you told me about what happened in Afghanistan, saving that family and bringing the child and reuniting with her. I mean, all these things, I was blown away. I could not believe what I was hearing. So what was it that really put it all together for you?
Yeah, it's a thoughtful question. I thank you for it. I was actually 17 years old.
Really?
I was a young infantryman. I was a private in the Army. When I was in base, I joined the Army on my 17th birthday. I actually dropped out of high school, and on my 17th birthday, went down to the recruiter's office because my high school girlfriend was pregnant. I wanted to be a father, and I wanted to provide, and I thought this would be a great way to do it. The only way I thought I could do it. Although I was a football player, I had dreams of, college football, but my biggest dream had been to just always, I wanted to be a father. While I was in basic training, my high school girlfriend's father found out she was pregnant. She was trying to hide it until I got out of basic, but he forced her to, he beat her up, and he forced her to get a third trimester abortion, early third trimester forced abortion.
Wow.
I took her to his friend. Her father was a doctor. And she called me. I wasn't raised Christian. My mother had me when she was 16. I didn't grow up talking about religion or politics at all. I'd never been to church a day in my life. But the idea that my child could be destroyed in such a way, I'd say, was my inciting incident. And it really broke me. It rocked me because my parents had me young. My mother was married and divorced quite a bit, had a lot of siblings. My father joined the Army shortly after I was born, didn't really see him again until I was in elementary school. Um, and so my dream was to just be a father and have a family, a safe home. This was my dream. So I thought, here we go. So it rocked me. And I get to my duty station. My mom always said that God rewarded me for my mistakes. And so I was stationed in Hawaii. I was in the 25th Infantry Division, 1st Battalion, 27th Infantry. And just a few weeks after I arrive at my duty station, I'm still 17 years old. Just a few weeks after I arrive, we go to Fort Benning. We go to Fort Benning. I'm sorry, we go to Cobra Gold in Thailand. And while we're on this, it's just a training exercise. We helicopter into the middle of nowhere. We're walking through the mountains, forced 72-hour forced road march as part of this exercise.
Wow.
It's fun to watch guys fall asleep while they're marching, and walking through the jungle. But we come across this village, and this man was holding his child. And his child was very sick. He was a teenager, and his child looked like he was dying. He was just very sick. And I had asked the interpreter what was going on, and the interpreter had asked this man. This man didn't even speak Thai, so I don't know where we were, what ethnicity this man was, but he said, I think he's dying of malaria. And I just saw the look in this father's eyes of absolute helplessness and sorrow, and it's exactly how I was still feeling. And I realized at that moment I might have been a teen parent, high school dropout, born to a teen parent, E1 in the Army. But I realized at that moment that there's a difference between me and this gentleman, that I have influence and power and access to opportunity. And I want to do the best I can with my life to gain influence and power and wealth and privilege, and then share it with the world's most vulnerable. At the time, I really thought I just wanted to be the best soldier in the world. Infantry, Ranger, Green Beret, Delta. This is what I thought. But as my service, my time in the military, as I continued to serve, and my company commander let me take college classes, I really realized that what vulnerable communities need is not, they don't need to learn how to, fire, AK-47s or use mortars. They don't, strategy and tactics. I mean, this is important, I'm sure, but that's not what I want to do. I want to learn how to get them on the front page of the New York Times. I want to learn how to use Hollywood and movie stars to advocate for vulnerable communities and move senators, and then now look, this week, the VPP was there with its cameras as the IDF came in and attacked the oldest Christian community in the world, and that message made it to the White House and to the Vatican. But that goes all the way back, probably not the answer you were thinking you're going to get, but it goes all the way back to just I was a 17-year-old boy.
Wow.
Carrying an M60 machine gun in the hills of Thailand.
Wow. So without revealing anything sensitive, tell us one story that has stayed with you, a moment that still affects you today.
Do you want it to be a sorrowful story or a positive story?
Well, I mean, I think the story that you share with me about the family in Afghanistan, I think everybody remembers that moment when the evacuations of Afghanistan was taking place during the Biden administration, the chaos at the gate, and what you had shared with me about that moment, and I did not have any clue what else was going on behind the scenes with people like you helping to reunite people. So I if you wouldn't mind, I mean, and other stories you've shared with me on the phone, I think there's so many ways we can go, but that one really stuck with me.
Yeah, the collapse of Afghanistan was very challenging for me. On July 6th, before the world really knew Afghanistan was going to fall, a buddy of mine had informed me that 85% of the districts in Afghanistan had already fallen to the Taliban. And VPP had never worked in Afghanistan, but my best friend did in a very high capacity at the Department of Defense and other government agencies. And he just thought I should know. I ended up getting COVID pneumonia, and I was really very, very sick on prednisone in my home office, thinking I was going to die, watching Kung Fu movies in my home office while I was dying. And my phone rang, and it was my business partner in my film company. And she said, one of my best friends' mother-in-law received a death letter from the Taliban. Can you help rescue her? And so we did a lot of this work in other countries. So I said, let me see what I can do. And we put together a team. We were able to help this woman. Within days, within the first week after that, I had 560 some people on a database that I had just created on my own. And I was working the phones, calling everyone I knew, all of my friends, just trying to leverage every relationship, knit together networks. And it was really something amazing to see the way the veteran community pulled together. It was organic. It was like unlike any, the world does not know how beautiful the the American veteran community came together and worked. In way, it seems hard to believe that it was just about a month from when everyone kind of woke up to when the final US plane left Afghanistan. And so we began working overtime. But in the day leading up to the Abbey Gate explosion, I had taken NyQuil. I hadn't slept in days. My hands were shaking, and everyone was telling me I needed to sleep, but I couldn't. I was on prednisone. I was hypervigilant. And I took NyQuil, and I said, I just killed somebody. If I go to sleep, someone's going to die. I just felt it. Within hours, I get a call from a friend of mine in Afghanistan. Move everyone away from Abbey Gate. We think there's going to be a terrorist attack. I didn't tell this publicly for a long time because I didn't want to be asked questions. But we now know the CIA knew, and they were following the bombers. And the Marines were given stand-on orders not to engage them. So I was up. I was able to move a family. And just hours before the bomb ripped through and killed 170 Afghans and 13 Americans. But the story I think that you're talking about, and this was jarring. Now you have to picture this. I'm in my house, in my home office. I have 7 children, 5 at home. I hear my kids laughing and playing, doors closing, doors shutting, the dogs scratching at the door for food. And it's just life. And my phone rings, on WhatsApp. And we have moved an Afghan evangelical pastor and his family into line. He calls me and says, my son has been shot in the stomach, and I have a decision to make. And you can hear the screaming and the crying and the wailing of the family and others. The Taliban fighter had just walked down the line as people were waiting to get into the airport and just randomly shot people. And he shot this teenage boy in the stomach. And so the evangelical pastor said to me, we have to make, if we go to the hospital, maybe my whole family will die. If we wait in line to get on the plane, my son will die. I don't know what to do. And I said to him, I cannot make that decision for you. And he said, I'll get back to you. And I never did hear from him again. And we don't know what happened. But then, of course, I have to have dinner with my family, play catch with my son, look at my wife, and act as if nothing happened. And there was a lot of that. I mean, a lot. And not for us, we're still there. We still have safe houses in Central Asia. We still work in Afghanistan. We never left. For the first 2 years, it was nonstop. After the fall of Afghanistan, for 2 years, it was pretty intense. Things have normalized, still pretty bad. A couple months ago, I did something I didn't want to do. I had to close one of our safe houses because we could no longer guarantee their safety because Pakistani police were raiding them relentlessly. And we said, you guys all have to have 60 days to find a way to get to somewhere safe, separate, not together. But we do still have Afghans who fought side by side with American fighters, female democracy activists who trusted us, who marched in protest for women's rights because we were liberating the women of Afghanistan, just like we're liberating the women of Iran. I have one young girl we rescued. She messaged me on LinkedIn, and I didn't believe she was real. It just seemed too strange. I thought she was what's called a dangle, where the Taliban or ISIS will pretend to be a vulnerable person so they can figure out our networks and what they want to do to our teams. So I just said, okay, Ahmed, sure, you're a teenage democracy activist that need our help. I go away. I don't believe you. And then she said, you're not the real Jason Jones. He would be nice to me. He's a gentleman. And I just told her to FaceTime me. So how weird is this, right? She FaceTimes me. Well, she had received a death letter. They would just, at the time when they were first coming in, people would get letters. And they'd say, hey, we're coming. And, And that's what happened. Her friend just got a letter and was killed. By God's grace, we were able to get her out of the country in a wild way. But yeah, it was relentless. The first 2 years were very hard. And I'll tell you what made it really hard more than all the other work I've ever done. And I was asking myself, why is this burdening me so much? What is different about this? And it's because I felt completely culpable. These were the people that trusted us. These are the people that worked for us. A representative of the United States government sat across from them on a table and said, if you sign on the dotted line in exchange for your service to the American people, we will grant you a visa when you're done with your time of service. And we broke our promise to 180,000 Afghans. There are 180,000 Afghans. Well, now maybe they said we got 30 out. So there are 150,000 Afghans that the United States government representing us made deals with these men and women that in exchange for their service that was putting their life and their families' lives in jeopardy, they would get a special immigrant visa. And we broke that promise. And, in the Ranger Creed, it says that never will I leave a comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And never will I do anything to embarrass my country. We allowed 150,000 of our comrades to fall into the hands of our enemy. And Joe Biden embarrassed this country. But what I wish the world knew, I worked with privates, guys who were like, I was in E3, this was our translator, I was in 10th Mountain Division, I served with him in wherever. Can you get him? I had a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff reach out to me. A member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff we had to help. It's like, wow, where's our government? Where's our government when someone from the Joint Chiefs of Staff? But this was the reality. It was from privates to generals. They all came together. Some still in the military, some, most of them civilians. But they all came together organically, and really something that was incredibly beautiful and heroic, knit together all of their networks, called all of their friends.
Some of the tactics, when we spoke about the way you get these people out, like using tactics to deceive the Taliban, who's right there with their guns in your faces, and you have to explain something, or you have to present something, or like some of the things you've told me, like how does that, when you're in that moment, if you could explain some of those moments, because you're literally on the edge of death with these people in these mountains or wherever these events take place, and you have to think quick. You have to act fast. You have to do something to make sure you can get beyond this checkpoint. And so explain some of those tactics if you can. I don't know what you're allowed to reveal, but
I can tell you two stories. One because our partner is dead, and the other because they know what happened after it happened. There was a German NGO reached out to me on behalf of actually, a very prominent Jewish humanitarian organization in the United States reached out to me, and on behalf of a German NGO, and said that there was this young Afghan girl that had worked for this German NGO. Her mother died, and her stepfather basically sold her as an ISIS bride. And people need to know ISIS and Al Qaeda are enemies. I'm sorry, ISIS and the Taliban are enemies. Like, they're not the same, right? So and Afghan is ethnically diverse. They're all different kinds of bad actors. It's just tragedy. So the case was brought to me. I went to my Afghan team. I looked at it. I looked where they were, and I vetoed it. She had tried to escape twice, and they beat her. The husband to be beat her, said, if you try to escape again, I'm going to kill you. So I went to my Afghan partners, and I said, we have to pass on this. And the gentleman that is the director of my Afghan operations, who lives in the United States, said, my brothers and I do not want to pass on this. This girl's going to keep doing it until they kill her, or she's going to kill herself, and there's a lot of that. I said, guys, if you get caught, and you're probably going to get caught, you're dead and your families are dead. They said, we can do it. So this was their plan. They were communicating with their cousin. They gave her a cocktail, something to drink, that would make her violently ill but not kill her or hurt her in any real way. There was a hospital that was nearby. They said, we'll have our people dressed in the front of the hospital like attendants. We'll bring them through. We'll bring her through the hospital, and we'll take her out a back door. She's going to look very sick for about a day or two. We're going to put her in a burqa, in a dusty old car with two old people. We're going to have a medical visa saying she needs to go to Pakistan for medical treatment, and we'll race her to the border. So they did it. They gave the
Wow.
girl the cocktail. She gets very sick. They take her to the hospital. Our team's waiting. They take her through the back door. They put her in a broken down old vehicle with a wheelchair sticking out of the back. They have all the visas, but the German NGO said she'd have her documents with her. Well, she didn't. So it's like 3 a.m. in Germany at the time. My American partner, Prince Wafa, he's a hero. He's a great American hero. He using Google Translate, it's work calling the NGO, calling the German NGO, finally gets a hold of them. At this point, I said, guys, you got 30 minutes. Keep driving towards the border. You got 30 minutes to get a hold of this German NGO and find out where these documents are. You have to turn around. I'm not going to lose all of you and all your families. Act like she was treated. Send her home. Try again. And they said, okay. They finally got a hold of the German NGO. They said, we have the document. Meet you at the border. The problem is with her documents is she had her hair done up and she was wearing makeup. Like, this is no good. She looks like she's a poor girl in a beat up car that's a traditional Muslim. Now we have her with makeup and,
Oh
and her
boy.
documents. Oh boy. Worse, she left her cell phone at home unlocked. So now this man had access to the numbers of our entire team and all of our communications.
Oh my goodness.
So it's really like out of a movie. As they were getting to the border, and because they were delayed, they were getting there later than they thought. So now there's a long line at the border. If you think crossing the border from Mexico to the United States from Tijuana is hard, you try crossing the border from Afghanistan to Pakistan, or Pakistan to Afghanistan. So they could see the family and friends like looking through the crowd trying to find her, going through, walking around from car to car looking in.
Oh my
And
goodness.
they were able to make it directly across the border. They were able to they made it. But the story doesn't end there. We had to move our entire team that was worked on that across the border to Pakistan for several months until things cooled down. And Prince, who now owns a grocery store in Northern Virginia and at the time owned two 7-Elevens in San Diego, the Taliban, or this not the Taliban, but this ISIS would be calling him, threatening him all the time. They were so sophisticated how we finally got well, I won't tell you that part. We were finally able to just convince them once and for all that she was living in the United States when she was not yet at the time. So that's one story. Another story, the girl I'm
Wow.
talking about through LinkedIn, she was kind of a very prominent case. We had someone in the Taliban that liked us for whatever reason. We were providing coal. By the time she got a hold of us, it was December after the fall. And so we had a program where we were delivering coal and food to the widows and orphans of our Afghan allies that were killed serving with the United States. It was called Coal for Christmas. And we delivered tens of millions of hours of heat through coal deliveries and millions of meals
Wow.
to Christians and other minorities and to SIV families. And we wouldn't play games. If they asked us for money to do this or that, we would never do that. We would just say, is there a village that needs a well? Are there elderly poor people that need kidney surgeries? That's a big thing in India. I'm sorry, in Afghanistan. So we had someone that we knew kind of was looking the other way at our activity. And so I said to one of my teammates, I'm a filmmaker. My favorite movie is a lot of people's favorite movies, Casablanca. But Casablanca has the biggest plot hole in Hollywood history. The letter of transit. Like, what an absurd idea that there could be a letter that people got murdered over and it was stolen. But if you had it, it was from the Fuhrer. You had to let him leave. But it was such a romantic, beautiful movie. We all just pretended not to question that very strange plot point. I asked our Afghan partner to ask for a letter of transit, a letter from them, signed by them with their number, and said, no questions asked. The bearer of this letter of transit can leave the country. And we actually got her out on a plane with her a letter of transit
Wow.
that I got the idea from Casablanca.
Oh, Jason, that's remarkable. The other story I want to hear, if I don't know, I just don't know what you can tell and what you can speak of, but
Sure.
I just remember the story of the child that was reunited with
Oh,
their
I sent you a
family.
video on that. On a
Yeah,
video on that. And I want to be clear, we're not Rambo. We're Rick's Cafe. You know how we do things. There have been times, unfortunately, where we have to contract Rambo, but we're
yeah,
not Rambo. You know, what we do is it's more like Rick's Cafe. There was a young woman who was found herself pregnant. Oh, so what happened is this family you're looking at here right here. This beautiful family. She served the U.S. forces. Her mom, her sister, and her husband and her baby were in line at Abbey Gate when the bomb exploded. A lot of people don't know is a firefight broke out as soon as the explosion happened. They were right at the gate. Grandma, auntie, and which was she was only 16, auntie was only 15 or 16, and baby got blown away from mommy and daddy. The mom and dad got pulled in by Marines onto the base. A firefight, a short firefight ensued. Grandma and baby and aunt were swept away by the crowd and pushed farther away from them. Mom was just crying. The Marines literally dragged her and her husband and just dragged them and put them on a plane where they were flown away from their baby. She was despondent. And now she was at one of our being processed at a camp for Afghans. They had nowhere for her to go, no way to help her and her husband, but she had a problem pregnancy. So they literally showed her the door of the camp and said, go figure out how you're going to deal with this problem pregnancy. Way to take care of your friends and allies. They make their way to where they know some folks in Austin, and she sees the great pro-life hero Abby Johnson has something called Love Line. Are you pregnant and you need help? And Abby is a good friend of mine. So they called Love Line. I'm pregnant and we need help. And so it was directed to a local pregnancy center. The local pregnancy center director asked someone in Texas state government how to help them. And they said, you should call Jason Jones. Her response was, the producer of the movie Bella, Jason Jones? How can he help? She didn't know that I lived in Texas, not far from Austin. You know, I'm from Hawaii. So she thought I lived in Hawaii. So this pregnancy center director calls me and says, this young Afghan woman's pregnant. Her family needs help. They're homeless. And they have a baby stuck. I'm like, look, where are you? She said, you know, we're in Austin. I'm like, I'll meet you at a coffee shop. I met them in a coffee shop. I met mom, dad, and she was pregnant, and the pregnancy center director. And said, look, what's going on? And she was just so nervous about her baby. Her mom was starving. Her baby was starving. I said, put in your mom's address in this WhatsApp group. And then I told my team on the ground in Afghanistan, I want you to bring them 4 months of food, coal, baby diapers, candies, toys, whatever you can get. And so within hours, we had delivered to the baby and the mom, you know, basically almost half a year of food and diapers and baby formula and coal for heat. We helped get temporary housing for them until they could get a job, and then another local church stepped in and provided more permanent housing. Thanks, I love the body of Christ, always there for the vulnerable, and I had to leverage every friendship I had. It is not easy to get an unaccompanied minor child from Afghanistan to the United States. I can tell you that. Everyone at the State Department said it was impossible.
wow,
But again, you know, if people want to know what do we do, how do we do what we do, it's through friendships. You know, at VPP, I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, and we've knit together a community of beautiful people, influential people across governments, across government agencies, across religious communities. We just rescued somebody. I would even like to tell you who it's for. I just don't know if I can. A very, very famous conservative personality asked me if we could rescue a child in Jordan. I mean, I'm sorry, in Gaza. The entire family was killed. This child was 6 and had a fractured skull. And I said what I always say. It sounds like impossible, but we'll do our best. And through a friend who's a journalist, a Palestinian Jordan journalist living in Jordan, who's a very charming man who has a large friend group, He reached out to his friends in the Israeli government and in Saudi. And long story short, within 3 weeks, we were able to get a child from under the rubble of Gaza, where he had lost his family, had a fractured skull, was fighting for his life in a camp, to a hospital in Jordan, and then reunited with relatives that were from outside of Gaza. And the folks that helped didn't know who they were helping. And the person who asked me would be shocked to know who helped. But at the end of the day, this was just people, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, from different countries that risked their careers, leveraged their life, and saved the 6-year-old boy. And we do, we don't do a lot. We're small. I'm not saying we're saving the world, but I take, Mother Teresa said, she was asked, how do you do what you do? Isn't it overwhelming, all the suffering in the world? She says, I just dip my bucket into the sea of suffering every morning. I take my bucket and I tend to my bucket. So that's what we do at VPP. We're not saving the world. We can't. But we do our best every morning to tend to our bucket.
Jason, it's a lot to take in, all these stories. And I mean, you've spent years, 30 years, you said now, working with persecuted Christians, religious minorities, refugees, vulnerable families. And I know we don't have much time left. You've got a heart out, but who do you believe is really being forgotten by the world right now?
Yeah, that's really what I look back to, me being a powerless 17-year-old boy who dreamt of nothing his whole life but being a strong, good man that would protect his family and couldn't protect his own child from violence. And so I'm always wanting to stand with those who want to protect their families but can't. And who are they? You have the Muslim Uyghur in China, 3 million in concentration camps, being mined for organs. The Falun Dafa and Falun Gong in China, the same thing, relentlessly hunted, persecuted, tortured, and harvested for organs. Of course, Christians and other religious communities too. The Christians across the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, the West Bank, Gaza, Egypt, in India. Just today, a massive campaign was launched in India to pass anti-conversion laws. Last year, in one state alone, 300 churches were destroyed in India.
Oh my goodness.
You have Christian children digging for cobalt with their bare hands so we can get our iPhones a little cheaper. In the Nuba Mountains of Sudan right now, it's hell on earth. And so when people are watching this, they're like, well, what can I do? We have rational ignorance. We can pray. There's things I wish that I can do, but because of my job, I can't do. Things I did when I was younger. I wish I could go to the old folks' home and play chess on Wednesday nights. I wish I could be reliable to my parish priest when he needs a man to help around in the community. I can't because I travel so much. I wish I could be more active as a donor and a volunteer to my local pregnancy center. But in this station of my life, I cannot. But wherever we are, whatever our station in life, we have the opportunity to serve the vulnerable, whether it's our spouse with depression or dementia, our parents, a sick child. You have a child with autism. If you're raising a child with autism, I don't expect you to join me in the Nuba Mountains because you have your mission there right in front of you to care for this child. If you have a spouse that's suffering from physical or mental illness, well, your hands are full. But I think what the gospel of Jesus Christ is, it's just very simple. We're called to love God for his sake and love each other for the sake of God. And when we do that, this exemplifies our faith and it points other people to our Creator. That's really why I do what I do. I want people to love God. The only gift God has given me, maybe he's given me three. I have a strong will. I lack the ability to anticipate the consequences of my actions, which I found is very useful for what I do. But also, I am really grateful for this. Since I was a little boy, I am in love with human beings. I'm just fascinated by them. When I walk through an airport, it's almost ecstasy for me. Like I get to be surrounded by all of these beautiful people. C.S. Lewis said that God must have put a veil before our eyes, because if we could see each other for our grandeur and dignity and beauty, we would drop to our knees at the sight of any human being we couldn't walk down the street. I think I don't have that veil. And so I hope through the work of VPP, we don't allow ourselves to be addled with bigotry or prejudice or hatred. Don't let October 7th make you stare at the Muslim woman in the hijab walking in the mall with a dirty look or hate her. Don't make Ben Gavir make you hate, or be disrespectful or unkind to the Jewish kid walking across Harvard Yard. Don't let the activities of Lindsey Graham make you hate Christians. I joke when I see myself in the mirror, I get angry. I go, look at that, but we cannot allow ourselves to be addled with cruelty or bigotry. We have to be animated with the love of each other, the love of the other, most especially, because that is what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. And at the heart of what we do, we are a Christian apostolate. Everything we do is simply to point people to love God and to love their neighbor.
Jason, that's so beautiful. And I want to ask you about media, modern media, international institutions. Do you think they're accurately portraying the suffering of these communities, or are important stories being ignored?
No, obviously, you cannot accurately portray the reality of what's happening. When I was in Iraq, as the Peshmerga were liberating Christian and Yazidi villages from ISIS, there was a smell that permeated the air, and that smell was burning flesh in the buildings that ISIS had bombed and left people to smolder. And they booby trapped the rubble so the Peshmerga couldn't even go remove the bodies. It's the worst smell on earth. To see young girls brought back, I saw the Peshmerga bringing young girls back that had just been brutalized for months and sometimes years in ways that are unspeakable and unimaginable by ISIS. You cannot communicate that with a camera. You can't communicate the smell of burning flesh, the look in a girl's eye who's been raped and tortured for years. When I was in Ukraine in the very first months after the war, I went into a hospital. It was the second biggest building I had ever been into my life after the Pentagon. Every room was filled with boys with no eyes, no arms, or no legs. You cannot communicate that with the camera. But what's sad is they're not even trying. When was the last time the reality of the ground for the people of Ukraine has been communicated to us? It is unbelievable. What is happening in eastern Ukraine, how many Ukrainian boys have died, it's unimaginable. Gaza, it is literally, no one tries to deny it. It is the equivalent of 15 Nagasaki's. And the amount of explosive force that was dropped. 95% of the buildings were destroyed. 100% of the Christian buildings, churches, schools, hospitals bombed. How do you communicate that with a camera? You just really can't. And I sometimes become sanctimonious and judgmental, but I have to remind myself that even my heart has been so hardened, even after experiencing these things with my own eyes, but I do wish the media did a better job. I will tell you what upsets me, though. When you have politicians like Lindsey Graham or Randy Fine, when Congressman Randy Fine was shown the image of a dead Palestinian child, he said, "Oh, that's a great picture. I'd like to see more of those." How does that not shock this country? How do grown men go and sign bombs like it's a joke? Violence is not a joke. War is not a joke. I'm not a pacifist. I come from a family of soldiers. I was an infantryman. My dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my brother, my uncle, my son fought in Iraq and Syria, my oldest son. But it's not a baseball game. It's not a football game. It's not a game. It's not a joke. You choose to go to war. We went to war with Iran. We killed 160 schoolgirls. That happens in wars. This is what war is. War is also human sex trafficking. A war is the fountainhead of human sex trafficking.
Yeah.
So when we go to war, Lindsey Graham, I hope you're watching, it's not a joke. As you're drunk and tipsy, getting gout, shoving lobster in your face, it's not a joke.
So when politicians, this brings me to my next question, when politicians and media figures talk about war from thousands of miles away, what do you wish that they would understand and that they so often miss or ignore?
I wish that they understood that what's happening to the children in Gaza today will happen to their grandchildren. That if we don't leave the Shire and stop Mordor in its tracks, Mordor will eat the Shire. At the end of the day, I really think I'm not a do-gooder or a humanitarian. I have 7 children, 4 grandchildren. I want my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to live in a beautiful world. So I feel I have a responsibility to prepare this world. Is it going to be a garden or a battlefield? Is it going to be filled with roses and sunshine and joy and opportunity, or is it going to be littered with corpses and sex trafficking, murder, brutality, exploitation. So when we shrug at what's happening in Gaza, we're dooming our own posterity. So it's not what I wish they knew. I guess I wish they knew how to love. I
Wow.
wish they were thoughtful to their own. My grandfather fought in World War II in Korea, and I know how war traumatized him. I have the men that work with me in our organization, all of them have fought in war. One gentleman who's a real hero of mine, Ryan Hendrickson, had his leg blown off in Afghanistan, 27 surgeries to be reattached. He was a Green Beret. Then he went back after having his leg reattached after 27 surgeries, did 7 more tours.
Wow.
And now, how's he spending his time? He's in Ukraine removing landmines because he doesn't want any child, he doesn't want any farmer, he doesn't want any mom walking to pick her daughter up from the bus stop to step on a landmine and go through what he went through. He loves. He knows what war is. It's not a joke. In fact, when I was going to Kyiv to meet him last year, as I stepped off the train, I called him, and he was out of breath because he had one of his men on his back. He had to carry him several clicks because one of his men had just stepped on a landmine as they were clearing landmines.
Wow.
And what did that man do once he got an artificial limb? He got an artificial limb of a bear paw. So now when the Russian soldiers see his feet, they see a boot, a bear paw, a boot, a bear. It's like half man, half bear. And he went right back to removing landmines. That's love. I wish our
Jason,
politicians had the honor of our soldiers.
we've only got a couple minutes left, and I want a final message for the people watching this interview. They may feel overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world right now. What have these experiences taught you about courage, faith, and human dignity? This is the final question.
Yeah, there was a doctor, Namom Ghaffari. She was a Kurdish woman who had fled Saddam Hussein and ended up going to Sweden. She ended up becoming a heart surgeon. After the rise of ISIS, she went back to Iraq. She'd work half the year, save all of her money, go into Iraq. She allowed herself to be captured by ISIS so she could tend to the Yazidi victims of ISIS. She said, "I'm a nurse. Can I please care?" After the war, she went to IDP camps. She bought an ambulance with her own money. When she exposed that some of the men in the IDP camps were abusing girls, they destroyed her ambulance and tried to kill her. I said to Dr. Ghaffari, I said, "Doc, you know, Rene Girard said to be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become as vulnerable as they are." And I guess you experienced that because they almost killed her. They were so mad, the men that she exposed. And she said, "You know, Jason, not only that, it's more. Not only do you become as vulnerable as them, but you have no right to expect their gratitude." And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. We have no right to expect their gratitude. We shouldn't even think of it. Well, she was really committed to reuniting Yazidi moms with their children that they had through rape. But because of culture, and there were a lot of challenges in making this happen. And Dr. Ghaffari worked for years and years to reunite Yazidi mothers with their babies that were still being held by ISIS. When she reunited she died 2 weeks later after she reunited the last of the children with their mothers of COVID in Syria. She was in her early 50s. She was brave. She was courageous. If she thought you were anti-Semitic, she would tell you you're Jewish. If she thought you hated Muslims, she would tell you she's a Muslim. If she thought you hated Yazidis, she would say she's Yazidi. I heard her say she was 10 different things to 10 different people, but she was probably a secular Kurdish woman from a Muslim family, and she was really the bravest woman that I know. And imagine, but the nature of my job is I'm not a hero, but I'm surrounded by them. And I'm so grateful that every single day I get to work with the bravest, most noble human beings on this planet.
Jason, I want to thank you for joining us. I really do. And I have to say, when I first met you in Washington, you know, I expected to meet an activist, but what I didn't expect was to hear story after story from someone who has spent years helping vulnerable people survive situations that most of us can barely imagine. And you only shared a few of them with us here. I mean, the war zones, persecution, humanitarian crises, families trapped between governments, militias, collapsing states, and violence. I mean, We spend so much time talking about geopolitics and strategy and power, but behind every conflict, there are human beings who are just trying to stay alive. So, Jason, once again, thank you for joining us. And the Vulnerable People Project, what you've done, I mean, you've chosen to go where most people won't, and I'm really happy that you chose this hour to be with us to share this information when most media outlets will just look the other way. You know, and folks watching, whether you agree with every political position or not, it doesn't matter. The stories themselves deserve to be heard. So, Jason, thank you so much for sharing them.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, you heard it. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Amazing, remarkable experiences, humanitarian work, and I'll be honest with you, we just scratched the surface. There's so much more to the Vulnerable People Project. And if you're interested, we'll put a link in the description, and it's right here on your screen, the Vulnerable People Project. And the website is thevulnerablepeopleproject.com. So make sure you go there, make sure you check it out, and drop your comments down below. We'll see you at the next report. Thank you for watching.